Mike Harris back with What in the Law podcast. And today I'm going to explain a little bit about why cases could end up in state court versus federal court. This is something that has been in the news a lot lately with various cases and arguments about what court something should be in. The general rule is that cases normally go to state court. States are given the authority for general regulation and police authority. The Constitution of the United States, in fact, very much limits what the federal government is allowed to do. So the average crime on the street, whether it be a DUI or a theft or even a murder, is normally going to be something in state court. To get into federal court, there has to be a reason or a link to the federal government's responsibility. One example is if something happened on federal land. So if you did something on a military base or a national park or in the District of Columbia, you are in federal land, and then you are going to end up in federal court if you are alleged to have done an offense. Another reason you could end up in federal court with federal charges is if the crime involved your job, that involved something to do with the federal government. So, for example, if you were a federal employee and you were stealing on the job, you would probably find yourself in federal court. Another example is if there is something that involves federal laws or the federal Constitution. For example, tax evasion. That could be in state court if you were charged with evading state taxes, but more often than not, when you are charged with tax evasion, it's because you are alleged not to have paid on your federal taxes and would probably be in federal court. Another example, which we see, is civil rights violations. For example, when we see police misconduct, and you see some of these horrible things that involve severe assaults or murders. How do they get into federal court? Because murder itself is actually not a federal crime. The reason it gets into federal court is because they are accused of violating someone's civil rights, especially violating their civil rights by killing them in certain cases, but that's how they get into federal court. And that's why a police officer who commits a murder on the job could find themselves in federal court, whereas the opposite might not be true and you would be in state court. Certainly other things like classified documents are going to be something that is going to be a federal crime. One of the most common federal charges are drug cases. The reason drug cases and other things can often get into court is because they are supposedly involved in interstate commerce. Part of what the federal government is allowed to do is regulate interstate commerce, and they use that to make certain things criminal that could affect that. And that's why drug trafficking is one of the main things that the federal government gets involved in. And they normally only do that on the more severe cases, but that's a little bit about why the federal government does certain things versus the state government. So there are certainly many other things that we could talk more about, but that's a bit of a breakdown on the main issues and the main separation of state versus federal. So I will see you next time on What in the Law podcast. Please remember to hit the like button and subscribe and send me your comments and send me any questions about what you would like to see on the next episode. So see you next time.